Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith, divine living. Come, let us worship together.
Start.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our great covenant. Please join me in singing, "Lo, the day of days is here."
Hello. I have a story to share with you today that was first shared with me by a UU religious educator named Joy Berry. She wrote a story about change. Now, there are a lot of different words for change, and you might know some already. Let's think of a few. Transformation, metamorphosis, adaptation. But you know, there's something I've noticed, and that's that we people, humans, sort of like to talk about change a lot more than we like to do it in some ways. Does that feel true for anybody? Now, of course, sometimes changes come whether we want them to or not, and I think we're living now in a time of really big changes, changes that we may or may not have anticipated, but changes that were not of our choosing. And it's a time of a lot of stress and anxiety for many of us, a time when we are sheltering in place and spending our time at home as much as we can to try and keep our communities safer, and ourselves safer, and our families safer. And change, even sometimes when it's change that we did choose, but especially when it's change that just came to us, that we didn't get to decide about, can be really hard. But there are some kinds of creatures that have an easier time with change, that they're more adapted to it. It's more something that they know that they're going to experience. There are some creatures that experience really, really, really big change during their lifetime. And one of those is the caterpillar. Now, how many of you have ever heard the story of the very hungry caterpillar? I think some of us probably have. Now, when caterpillars are first born, they hatch out of teeny tiny little eggs, and they start out as teeny tiny little caterpillars. But they don't stay teeny tiny for very long. Just like in the story, the very hungry caterpillar, they eat and they eat and they eat and they eat. And after a while, they're so big, they're too big for their skin. Now, does that happen for people? No, it doesn't. We know that as we grow, our skin grows with us, right? But that is not what happens for caterpillars. And so after a while, their skin begins to feel too tight. Have you ever had clothes that as you were growing, you got too big for them and you didn't really realize at first until suddenly you noticed that it was like you had a shirt that was really way too tight? Yeah, that happens for caterpillars, except that it's their skin. But something amazing happens. When they get too big for their skin splits right down the back and they kind of crawl out of it. Now that's okay. That's really fine for the caterpillars, but because what they have underneath that skin is a new skin that's bigger and more suited for the size they are now. And in fact, that happens 4 or 5 times during the caterpillar's life, until the final time when its skin splits and it comes out of it, and what is beneath is a new kind of skin that is actually different than the old kind they had. And it is something that is called a chrysalis. And a chrysalis, it starts out kind of soft, but after a while it hardens and it becomes something that is like a hard shell that the caterpillar lives in as its body begins to go under really, really big change. Now, some of you already know what caterpillars become. What do they change into? They change into butterflies. And we talk a lot about how amazing it is when butterflies emerge from the chrysalis and they unfurl their wings and they fly away. But I think the real magic is actually what happens inside that chrysalis while their bodies are transforming. A caterpillar doesn't just change from, if you could see inside a chrysalis halfway through, you wouldn't see something that was kind of like half a caterpillar, half a butterfly. That's not how it works. And in fact, in every single cell of a caterpillar, from the very moment it's born, it has DNA, and that's sort of like a blueprint or a recipe for how its body gets put together. And caterpillars are actually born with 2 kinds of blueprints for 2 completely different bodies. And they have something that's called imaginal cells that can turn into any kind of body part they need as they are going through their transformation inside the chrysalis when they are in their pupa stage. And so the caterpillars, they don't just kind of change straight from caterpillar into butterfly. No, the first thing that happens is the caterpillar's body begins to break down and it just kind of turns into mush. It turns into a kind of goo. It's kind of soupy. There's no parts. It doesn't seem like something that's alive at all, and yet it certainly is. Inside that hard shell, it is a life within life that doesn't look like anything hardly at all from the outside. Well, it turns into this goo, into this soup, and then those imaginal cells know exactly what to do to begin to build body parts that the caterpillars never needed before, that they never had before. What is a body part? One of the body parts that a butterfly has that caterpillars don't. I bet there's one that we all think of right away, probably many of us, the wings. That's right. And so from the goo, that butterfly's body begins to be put together inside that chrysalis. Now, there's some people who, there's a saying that you might have heard before that's called let go and let God. That sometimes people who believe in a God who has a plan and believe that things will mostly work out okay if you just kind of stop worrying so much, they might say that, let go and let God. Now, I think, though, that if caterpillars could talk to one another when they are in those chrysalises, I don't think they know what's happening to them. I don't think they know that they're turning into butterflies and one day they're going to have beautiful wings and they're going to be able to fly away. But I think they do know that what they need to do is to let go and let goo. That they know that their bodies are creating something. Their bodies know what to do. Perhaps we, in this time of sheltering in place, in this time of staying mostly inside the shells of our homes as much as we can, those of us who are able to, perhaps we are going through a kind of transformation too. Perhaps the way we are as people, the way we are as a society, perhaps we're learning new ways to be, or relearning really old ways. It's occurred to me recently that some of these ways of living mostly at home might be more like the ways that my distant ancestors experienced being in the world, that you didn't leave home as much as we do these days. Now, of course, they didn't have the internet and computers, and they didn't have videos, and they didn't have ways to connect directly the way we do today when we are physically distant, but still staying socially and spiritually connected. But there's something in that we are learning different ways of being. And perhaps if we let go and let go, if we recognize that even though some of this change is really hard, and even though some terrible things are happening for some of the people, and we know that we are doing the best we can to take care of our communities and keep people safe, even through all of that, perhaps some of the transformation that's happening is something that could turn out to be really wonderful in the ways that we build our society to take better care of one another, to make sure that we're safe, to check in and connect and be really intentional, to take the time we need. All of those things that some of us are learning at this time, some of us are having a harder time with. But I hope that we find the transformation that happens in our communities, something that comes out of it is something really beautiful. May we become our butterfly selves. May we become our butterfly community in this time of sheltering inside the chrysalis of our home space, of staying safe as we can until it is time to emerge again. And now, I have something else to share with you. That was the end of our story, but this is Easter Sunday, and usually, in most years, when we have gathered together in person in the congregation, we have offered an Easter egg hunt after the service for all the young people in our community who want to take part. And of course, we are not gathered together in person today, and so we can't do that kind of egg hunt, but if you would like to be part of a virtual egg hunt that we're going to have today, we wanted to offer some kind of fun and a kind of egg hunt that we are able to do. And so I've asked for help from people in our community to help us put it together. And so if you are interested and want to be an egg hunter, I encourage you to stick around on this live stream, after the end of the service today. You'll see a little notice that comes up that says to stay, and I will be back to talk with you about our egg hunt at the very end. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Claudia Presley, and I'm the Director of Administration at TVUUC. This is Easter Sunday morning, and that's a time of celebration, that's a time of family, that's a time of getting together. One of the things I always think about at Easter is home. Home, being with my family, being with my friends, being at my grandparents', being at my parents' house, being at the house that I live in now. It is always a time to get together with those that we love and that we care about. Today, we're not able to be at our home at TVUUC. But what we would like to ask you to do is help us to keep our home here for when you can be with us, when you can come back and we can be with you, our friends, the ones we love. The way you can do that today is to give to our offering. You can go to our website, which is tvuuc.org/give, or you can text give to the number 73256 and then TVUUC and the amount that you would like to give. What that will allow us to do is to continue to pay for our utilities, to continue to pay our staff, to continue to honor the commitments that we have made within this community and to each other. So we'd like you today to think about home, those that you love, those that you want to be with, and to think about coming home to us at TVUUC soon. Thank you for being with us today. God bless.
Black liberation theology came at a time when there was just uprising of Black Panthers, the Martin Luther King, civil rights, Malcolm X. And so Black theologians sought to find truth, to find a way to speak of the pain that exists in the African American culture and in our religious experience. The late Vernon Jones, pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, said these words: "The thing that disappoints me about the Southern white church is that it spends all its time dealing with Jesus after the cross, instead of dealing with Jesus before the cross." He was addressing another Baptist preacher. "You didn't do a thing but preach about the death of Jesus. If that was the heart of Christianity, all God had to do was to drop him down on Friday and let him kill him, and then yank him up again on Easter Sunday. You don't hear much about his 3 years of teaching, so much that the man's religion is revealed in the love of his fellow man. That is what offended the leaders of Jesus' own established church, as well as the colonial authorities from Rome. That's why they put him up there on that cross. I want to deal with Jesus before the cross. I don't give a damn what happened to him after the cross." And so, again, Black liberation theology sounds angry and frustrated, but in reality, if you get past the tone used, you will hear underneath a truth that we forget to look at what Jesus did the 3 years before his death. Join me in prayer. We come before you, that highest goal, the highest one in our lives, the ones that lead us to do well, to do good to others, to be kind. We come to that space in us that begs to forget the fear, the anxiety, and to greet each other with love, and to be resurrected in this time of putting aside all our anger, our hate, and embracing our forgiveness, and seeing the growth that is in not only ourselves, but in others. And we come to this holy space to say that we want to live a way that looks to heal, that looks to care, and that begs to take care of the poor, the lost, and to demand justice from our leaders. We come to this holy space that is found not only in ourselves, but in the world and among each other when we look at each other, to know that love is what guides us. Love is what embraces us. Love is what comforts us. Love is what we seek. No matter how we approach it, we know in the end, love is the answer. Amen. Immortal, invisible. Please join me in lifting up your voices to sing.
Immortal, invisible, God
There's a story that's told of a preacher who is performing a memorial service, and he's trying to find exactly the right words to say, and he's struggling for the right metaphor, and he has a slip of the tongue. As he's standing over the coffin, he says, "Here lies only the shell, the nut is gone." Possibly not the best choice of words for such a solemn occasion. And yet what the story reveals is that at the heart of religious life is this mystery that we know we are alive and we know one day we will die. And many religious rituals center around this great mystery. There is some part of the human spirit that longs for something more, that longs for a love that is stronger than death and a passion more powerful than the grave. This week I've been practicing a little social distancing on wheels. I have been riding my bike around town, and I was riding past a cemetery when I noticed this beautiful blossoming tree in the middle of all the graves. And then a little further down I saw an institution that had gone out of business and the building had been abandoned, but there was this wonderful flowering bush in front of the store. Everywhere we look, there are signs of life in the midst of death, vitality in the midst of decay. A friend said to me this week that it is ironic that this year the Passover Seder might be canceled because of a plague. The Passover is a celebration of the movement from slavery into freedom. And it is held at the time of year when the seasons are changing, when winter is turning into spring and death is becoming new life. There are many resurrection stories in both the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. There are resurrection stories associated with the prophets Elijah and Elisha. There are in the New Testament stories of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and there's the stories of the crucifixion and resurrection. But perhaps if a miracle of old, or a miracle that we can find in an ancient scriptural text, is about the resurrection of the body, perhaps what we need now most is a resurrection of the spirit, a resurrection of hope, a resurrection of love. When Oscar Romero was bishop in El Salvador, he was an outspoken advocate for the rights of the poor and the oppressed, and he often spoke out even though he received many death threats over the course of his career, and he was ultimately murdered while celebrating the Mass in a church. But when he was asked why he continued to speak out even though he received all these death threats, he said that as a priest he did not believe in death without resurrection, and he knew that if one day he was killed, he would be resurrected in the spirit of the people of El Salvador. A similar thing was said about John Brown, who led a liberation movement of African American slaves in the American South before the Civil War. After he was killed, after he was executed for leading this movement, the song John Brown's Body was sung. John Brown's body is a moldering in the grave, but his soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul is marching on. If we align ourselves with the Spirit, if we align ourselves with that which is eternal, immortal, and invisible, then the body may die, but the Spirit keeps moving on, keeps on moving forward. Martin Luther once said, "The body they may kill, but God's truth abideth still." Or as William Cullen Bryant once observed, "The truth crushed to the earth will rise again." Today on Easter Sunday, all over the world, there are church buildings that are closed. No one is in them. The buildings are as quiet, as silent as an empty tomb. And if we were to approach one of those buildings, we might hear the words of the angels. "Why do you look for the living among the dead?" For the church is taking new forms in our time. We're changing not because we want to, but because we have to. But we are changing. We are moving forward. The crucifixion of Jesus did not end his ministry, nor will the shutting down of our buildings end the ministry of the church. When I was a child, I was told that Jesus died so that I might live. And if I'm honest with you, I will admit that when I was a kid, that felt like a pretty big guilt trip to lay on a little kid. But today, in the midst of our pandemic, I am aware that there are doctors and nurses and healthcare providers and people who have been offering essential services who have died so that we might live. And I'm aware that at the heart of all the great world religions, there is a call to live a life of goodwill and sacrificial service, sometimes in big ways and sometimes in small ways. Our little efforts make a difference. One of the small efforts we can do to honor the people who have made so many big sacrifices is to wear a face mask. When we go into public, when we go into the grocery store, to place the mask over our face. Now in Asia, a mask is seen as a sign of respect for others. I think in America, all too often, the mask is seen as a sign of fear and a desire to protect the self. But we need to reclaim the mask for what it is. It is an effort to show respect for other people. It is an effort to show compassion toward other people, knowing that the life we may save may not be our own. It is a mark of unselfishness. And so maybe we need to make some of these masks that have words on them like love one another or love your neighbor as yourself, to remind them that they're not selfish. They are expressions of compassion and goodwill. Face masks save lives. And because they save lives, they do the work of salvation. If you read the Torah, the first books of the Bible, there is no reference to heaven or hell or to life after death, but there are many references to salvation. Salvation in the Hebrew Scriptures means about moving from slavery, being saved from slavery, and moving toward a promised land where we can all be free. I once met a man who had spent time on death row for a crime he did not commit. And he said to me, when I was on death row, an innocent man on death row, he said, when I was on death row, many ministers would come to see me, and they would want to save my soul. And I told them, I don't need you to save my soul. I need you to save my life. And eventually he was able to find a good lawyer who did just that. And the innocent man was able to leave prison and know freedom. This is the work of salvation. This is the work we do when we place a face mask over our mouths, or when we wash our hands, or when we do other small gestures to save lives. It is the work of salvation, and it can be informed by a love that is stronger than death and a passion more fierce than the grave. There is a scripture that says, if a grain of wheat is on the stem all by itself, it is just one thing, but if it falls to the ground and dies, it can bear a rich harvest. Similarly, an acorn on a tree, all by itself is just one unit, but if it falls to the ground, it can give birth to a new tree, and if other acorns fall to the ground, it can become a forest. There is no death without resurrection. So do not give up hope. Do not give in to despair. Keep hope alive. Remember the words of the psalmist. Weeping may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And even in these grim times, try to keep a sense of humor. Remember something a witty and irreverent and wise friend once said to me. He said, the greatest oak in the forest was once a nut, just like you.
Lo, the earth awakes again. Join us in this final hymn of celebration.
Prophetic Church, the world awaits your healing ministry. Rest in place, stay healthy, and know the truth that makes us free. And when we see each other out in the world, let's greet our neighbors and show our respect for each other in every action that we take. By wearing our face masks, by washing our hands, by keeping 6 feet apart, we show that we love one another, that we love our neighbors, and we can greet each other saying namaste. The divine spark in me sees and honors the divine spark in you. Go in peace.
Hello, thank you for sticking around for our virtual egg hunt today. So this week I invited people in our wider community who would like to help us put together an egg hunt to send me photographs from their spaces, indoor or outdoor, in which one or more Easter eggs are hidden. Now they're not completely hidden, they're all visible in some way, although some are really easy to see, some are a little more tricky. But we're going to share a video with you in just a moment with a lot of those images, and my challenge for you is to count how many Easter eggs you can find in our video. Now at the very end, I might let you know how many there were, although I might or might not be exactly right with my count. There might be some that I missed because they're tricky. But we'll see how many I came up with, and we'll see how many you did too. And we might have some other challenges for if you're watching the video at the end, or if you want to rewind and look. We might ask you to find how many of particular colors, or some other challenges too. But for right now, your job is to look for every egg you can see in our video. And of course, you might have noticed that there are some already here. Have you noticed? Have you been paying attention? There are 2. Let me see if I can show you where they are. There's one right there. I bet you've seen it already. And there's one more right there. Oh, it's really kind of hiding. I think it slipped a little. So enjoy our virtual egg hunt, and I hope you're having a wonderful Easter.